So the drama continues here in the Gospel of John, sitting around that table there in the upper room. It's Wednesday, and I'm glad to see you again studying the Bible. So I hope someday you go with me to the Holy Land. Many of you maybe watching these videos have been to the Holy Land with me. But we go to the upper room. It's super interesting. I am sure it's the place. There's a nun that sort of manages, and there's this little chapel, and then you go into the upper room, and it's really quite extraordinary. And some people say, how do you know that's really the upper room? Well, I'll tell you one way you know it's the upper room, because when you go into it, you go down. And you think, well, that didn't make any sense, because the upper room should be up, but it's not, it's down. Why would it be down? Because 2,000 years of junk had collected on the floors of Jerusalem. And the city gets bigger and bigger. Any archaeologist would tell you that, right? That's why they always dig down to find stuff. You can dig down and find a second floor in the city of Jerusalem. That's wonderful, magical, mysterious city. What an extraordinary place to go. But so you go down into that space, which we know as the upper room, because tradition remembers it, right? That's where the disciples locked themselves in. That's where Jesus walked through the wall. That's where Thomas touched his side. That's where they were on the day of Pentecost. People said, that's the room. Where's the room? That's the room. And then children would tell their children, hey, where was the room? That's the room. And then children would tell their children, where's the room? That's the room. That's how we know where Golgotha was. That's how we know where Jesus was born. That's how we know where the upper room is, and you go down to get to it. So here we have it. Chapter 13, Gospel of John, verse 21. Jesus foretells his betrayal. Now remember, a couple of chapters talking just about how to prepare the disciples to be in the world after Jesus dies and then is resurrected. After saying this, Jesus is troubled in spirit. Remember, he just called out Judas and what Judas was going to do, and declared, very truly, I tell you, one of you will betray me. He says that, and they're like, what are you talking about? Now, Judas might not even think he's going to betray Jesus. Even in his mind, he's not saying, oh, God, they busted me. Because what Judas was thinking, well, some think, and I think this is probably true, he was tempted, he was all confused, he got his politics as his priority, and he forgot the reality of that this is God's world. And so what I think he was believing is that if he could motivate Jesus. He had seen Jesus heal people. I mean, he knew the power of Jesus. He had seen Jesus feed 5,000 people. And so he's thinking, if I could motivate Jesus, right, to defend himself, then it'll sort of unleash his power, and he will show the world how he is the Messiah. He was looking to instigate him, so he wasn't thinking maybe that he was betraying him. He was looking to actually be the motivator of Jesus taking up the mantle of Messiah and changing the world. Jesus knew that wouldn't happen. The disciples look at one another, uncertain of whom he is speaking. One of his disciples, the one whom Jesus loved, Lazarus. Right, so here remember, I talked about Lazarus was becoming wildly popular in chapter 12. And he knew that he was distracting from the reality of who Jesus was as the second person of the Trinity because of his celebrity from being somebody that raised from the dead. And so he shifts his identity now, here starting in chapter 13, to be the beloved disciple. Right? And what he's saying here is, see, I know Jesus is God. And now I'm a beloved disciple. And you out there, even down to you and me, we can be the beloved disciple. We're the ones that can put ourselves in this role, taking on that mantle, that title of beloved disciple, to set ourselves right close to Jesus. Because from now on, chapter 13 through chapter 21, we're going to see how the beloved disciple is always right next to Jesus. And that is our goal too as followers, to always be right there next to Jesus. So somebody can say, hey, what do you think Jesus would say? We can say, well, let me ask, because I'm right next to Jesus. It's possible. So there you go. Peter yells across the table, hey, dude. No, that's what he says. Verse 24. Simon Peter therefore motions to the beloved disciple to ask Jesus of whom he is speaking. So while reclining next to Jesus, the beloved disciple asks him, Lazarus, asks him, Lord, who is it? And Jesus says, it is the one to whom I give this piece of bread when I dip it into the dish. And so when he had dipped the piece of bread, he gave it to Judas, son of Simon Iscariot. Now, why is this such a big deal? Because it's important for Lazarus, the author, to point out that Jesus knew what was coming, right? That Jesus wasn't caught off guard here. That Jesus made a conscious choice over and over again to do what God was calling forth from his life. And Judas was an important piece of that. After Judas received the piece of bread, Satan entered into him. And Jesus said, do quickly what you're going to do. Right? Temptation overtook him. Now, no one at the table knew why Jesus said this to Judas. Some thought because Judas had the common purse, Jesus was telling him, buy what we need for the festival, or that he should give something to the poor. So after receiving the piece of bread, Judas immediately went out, and it was night. Now, the last piece is important because Jesus is the light, and Judas had rejected the light, and so he was in the night. Lazarus rewrites this back into the story, so as we're looking at it, in retrospect, we understand that Jesus was inviting Judas to be fully who God created him to be, even when it was continuing to empower him to have freedom to kill God. So we're all free in the same way that Judas was free to do what Jesus invites us, to always be open to the invitation of Jesus. What I'd like you to consider right now, though, is your belovedness and how you're called to be close to Jesus. And what are the moments when you feel closest to Jesus? Like the beloved disciple when he was having a meal. Pray about that. What are the moments when you feel closest to Jesus? I love you. See you tomorrow. Peace upon your soul.